Hi YouTube, Kyle Kittleson here with MedCircle, joined by the fantastic clinical psychologist, Dr. Ramani. We just filmed a series on trauma, and you were sharing some misconceptions around trauma that are really pervasive. And I'd be curious to hear what all of our viewers think of other misconceptions about trauma that you've experienced or you've seen firsthand. So after you hear Dr. Ramani's three, leave ones that we could have missed out in the comments section below. So Dr. Ramani, what is the first misconception when it comes to trauma?
I would say it's the overuse of the term trauma to describe things that don't really fall under that definition, which really is trauma is an experience that is far beyond that which is considered normal human experience, and during which a person feels a significant risk or experience of bodily threat or death. So that's way beyond, for example, people will say, I had to wait 2 hours in line at the airport, I have trauma.
Yeah.
Not unless you saw someone get shot in that line. An inconvenience, a difficulty, that's not a trauma. And to call these sorts of everyday occurrences, or maybe even not everyday, but major inconveniences, a trauma, is to minimize and trivialize the experience of people who are living with trauma and whose lives and psyches are turned upside down by trauma. And I think we just need to watch that overuse of that term, because again, it really misses the boat on how much trauma psychologically affects people and actually can hurt them as they go through their experience, thinking like, well, maybe I'm over exaggerating and minimizing that experience. So just really I tell people, be careful, and we need to be aware of that when we use that term. What does it really mean?
Yeah.
Because it means something very specific in the world of mental health.
Yeah, your favorite cafe running out of avocado toast is not a traumatic event. And we do this with so many mental health terms. Oh, that's so OCD, or I'm so OCD, or I have PTSD, and likely they don't, but they're using the term incorrectly. So all of us need to do a better job at doing that. So let's move on to our second misconception.
You can always tell that somebody's experienced a trauma by looking at them.
Oh, right.
So I could tell if someone's been through trauma. I could just look in their eyes. No, you can't. You would be shocked by the number of people you may have in your life that you've encountered, that you work with, even amongst your friends, that have experienced a very real and frank trauma that either maybe they've processed and, that they feel they understand. They may not want to talk about it, that they don't want to talk about it, that they haven't shared it. But it is more common than you might think, and you can't tell just by looking at someone. And that is because when people go through trauma, while there are some universals in how people present, that can vary depending on how soon after the trauma it is, the nature of it, how many years down the road, or depending on a person's age. All of those things may matter in terms of the experience of how someone will express a trauma. But we can't tell if someone's been through trauma just by looking at them. Again, estimates vary widely in terms of how many people experience trauma. We have better statistics on how many people experience post-traumatic stress disorder. It's probably about, maybe 20% plus or minus of people who have experienced a significant trauma go on to develop post-traumatic stress disorder, but that varies based on the nature of the trauma. Those rates are going to be higher, for example, for someone who's experienced rape or sexual assault. It may be lower for other kinds of traumatic events. So that also is going to vary quite a bit. So I think that what we have to keep in mind is that there is no universal. There's trends, things like hypervigilance, hyperarousal, anxiety, sense of a foreshortened future, re-experiencing, depression, social withdrawal. Those are things we do tend to see in people with trauma, but it's not always the same. It's not always on the same time frame. But no, you can't tell by looking at someone. And so when you meet a person, that's not something you can just say, I figured this out. Or even worse, to meet someone and say, they're so well put together. There's no way they could have experienced a trauma. I cannot think of anything further from the truth. A person experiencing trauma does not mean that they're forever set back and can't go on to a full and extraordinarily successful life. But that idea that if he's or she is well put together, they could not have been through trauma. It's something that often hurts people. You're saying, well, maybe that bad thing didn't happen to them because they're doing so well. To which I say, how dare you?
Absolutely.
How dare you ever make an assumption about somebody else's life?
And in our series, the idea of resilience came up, and you said something that made me hit the edge of my chair. Let's give our viewers an inside look at this part from our series on trauma.
Resilience is the belief and then the execution of being able to survive in the face of a crisis, potentially a trauma. Here's where I want to tread lightly, because there are people out there who struggle with trauma. That doesn't mean they're not resilient.
Ooh, good point.
And I don't want anyone out there who's a trauma survivor saying, I'm folding under this, I must not be resilient. The heck you're not.
Yes.
You are resilient.
Yes.
You have been pushed beyond the normal bounds of human experience. None of us know how we're going to react to a trauma until we're in it.
That's right. You can watch that entire series at medcircle.com or just use the links below this video. Let's move on to our third one, Dr. Ramani.
That trauma is only defined by something happening directly to you. That you have to be assaulted. You are the one who's raped. You're the one who's kidnapped. It has to happen to you. In fact, trauma can also be defined by witnessing something happening, like a crime, assault, murder of someone close to you, a loved one, or someone close to you, to witness that. It's that qualifies as a trauma. Yes. And people say, well, that didn't happen to her. How can she say that's a trauma? And we can see that, for example, after natural disasters, people can experience post-traumatic stress disorder, post-traumatic stress, and that qualifies as a trauma because they've gone through, perhaps, if not watching their own home wash away, think of a tornado, which can selectively go down one side of the street, but not another. Watching your best friend's home, your long-standing neighbor's home, just, be swept away, that's a trauma. Because also that thing was across the street. It could have also harmed you. It may very well have harmed those people close to you. So it doesn't have to happen to you. It can be about witnessing. Because what some people will feel is like, what right do I have to feel trauma? I didn't go through this. I'm being ridiculous. I must be weak. How dare I say I have trauma? It's survivor guilt. Exactly. So it's that idea that, yes, if it happens to you, if somebody watches harm come to their child, to their partner, or even to a friend or neighbor, that does qualify. And what that means, though, is that to be aware that does qualify as a trauma, the person may be experiencing it as a trauma, and that definitely means that they need to seek out appropriate mental health services.
Yes. Well, this series walks you through the signs to look out for in somebody who may have experienced trauma. This is a great series for teachers, a great series for nurses, a great series for anyone who's working with a population in a intimate, close proximity, so that they can look at different changes in behaviors, different things that they might be struggling with, which could indicate that they experienced a trauma. And then Dr. Ramani explains, now what do you do? How do you talk to that person? How do you support that person? What types of mental health professionals are right for that person? And what does a successful treatment regimen look like? It was really eye-opening to me because trauma is so pervasive in mental health. I mean, you said off camera, so much of what you do is trauma-based.
In fact, when I teach my abnormal psychology class and I break down numerous mental illnesses in class, one of the things I keep teaching them about is what puts a person at risk for developing any given mental illness, from depression to substance use to eating disorders to personality disorders. Honestly, on my multiple choice exams, you're not going to get it wrong if you choose trauma, because it is so much a predictor of so much of mental illness and mental health issues down the road. Now, does that mean it always has to be? Like, in other words, a person experiences trauma, it's a guarantee that it's always going to be a problem for them? No. That's why rapid identification and intervention becomes so important. I do not think that a trauma survivor by any stretch of the imagination is defined by their trauma, but I do think it's critical that it be addressed. The sooner the better, but it's never too late. But however, unaddressed, it's associated with all sorts of mental health issues down the road. So I think that's why it becomes one more reason that it's important to address these things early and to protect people from trauma whenever possible.
Yeah. I said it at the end of the series we just filmed. I said to Dr. Ramani, you explain things so clearly so people understand it, but it's wrapped in such warmth so people feel it. And that's why people love you so much. That's why you'll see so many, you guys are gonna think that I'm trying to get you to put a thumbs up, but I do watch. They put more thumbs up when you're there because they're feeling the warmth that you provide. And so I appreciate that.
I appreciate that. I do. I mean, I feel like it is the greatest privilege in this world to be able to be a mental health practitioner. The amount of strength and courage and resilience, and honestly, sometimes laughter that my clients have brought into my lives, like they are absolutely extraordinary people, not just them, but the huge community of people who reach out to me on other platforms. Amazing. And I think that my only goal has always been to take this conversation about mental health and elevate it in a way so that we all take responsibility for our mental health and look out for the mental health of the people around us. That we need to be able to talk about this free of stigma and realize that we're all human and this is part of this beautiful journey. So that's all I've ever tried to do. So I appreciate that.
And you're doing it.
Thank you.
If you like Dr. Ramani, use the links below. You can view all of Dr. Ramani's series that she's done for MedCircle. It's quite the library, so make sure you check that out. Thank you for watching here. Like and subscribe and comment below. Love to read those comments. I read all of them, by the way. I still do. I'm Kyle Kittleson. Remember, whatever you're going through, you got this. Subscribe below, and remember, this video just scratched the surface. For more in-depth videos on mental health topics, go to medcircle.com and join for free.